Resident Evil 4 is often considered by many to be one of, if not the best horror games of all time. But is it really worthy of all its praise? Well, stick around if you're interested in hearing my answer. Quick note here, the only other games I'd played in the series before this were RE5, which I did not enjoy, and 3D The Mercenaries, a 3DS exclusive which was actually pretty fun. For today's review, I played the PC/Steam version of this game, which is a port of the PlayStation 2 version if I am not mistaken, and things got off to a bad start for me, as the game simply did not want to run at first, and looking at some negative Steam reviews, I'm not the only person who had performance issues, and I had to turn everything down to the lowest graphics setting and cap the FPS at 30 to even get it to run, which made no sense as I far exceeded the recommended PC specs, but I digress. I wish I could say that my issues ended there, but no. The game crashed on me once, causing me to lose at least a good 20 minutes of progress, which did not amuse me in the least, and I would have some minor issues here and there, like every now and then I'd shoot an enemy and he wouldn't take damage. At one point, I got shot in the back of the head by an arrow and there was nobody behind me, or on one occasion, during a QuickTime event, the game decided to show me keyboard controls instead of Xbox controls. I used an Xbox One controller, and I died because I didn't know what to press, although thankfully this only occurred once. But overall, I cannot give this port the best marks for performance. Putting this aside, I think my biggest issue with RE4 is the bloody length. According to How Long to Beat, the average completion time is about 16 hours, with some people saying it took them over 20 hours to finish. While the gameplay is overall enjoyable, it got stale after about the 12-hour mark, and became too much of a good thing in my opinion. Around the 15-hour mark, I was really just getting tired of this game, and wanted it to end. And at around the 17-hour mark, I quit, after Ashley seemingly got hit through a wall by an enemy and died. I just didn't have the oomph left to finish this long game, but I did get close, level 5 too. Now, I know everyone is different, but I personally prefer titles that are 9 hours or less, and while there are exceptions, I often get wary of a game around the 12-hour mark and want to try to wrap things up. So in my opinion, you have a title that is overall pretty enjoyable, but just stretched too far in my opinion, like butter spread across far too much bread. Now, I've stated a couple times that gameplay was overall enjoyable, so let's get into that. I'm going to divide gameplay into 3 sections: solo play, where it's just Leon, boss fights, and my least favorite, escort sections, where you babysit Ashley while fighting mutants out for your guts. Of the 3, solo play, where it was just Leon, was where this game shined the most in my opinion. You navigate areas using your map, while scavenging for items and fighting enemies when necessary. While a tad tedious at times, it was overall pretty fun. Playing on normal difficulty, combat and the camera angles did take some getting used to, with things like not being able to move while firing your gun and reloading it. This was frustrating, but I also appreciate what the devs were going for, adding in a bit of a desperation effect. But as someone who has fired a gun while moving, it's definitely not physically impossible. And the gunplay was pretty much a third-person shooter, but you need to use your ammo wisely, as you were usually provided with not a lot more than what was needed to progress, but I never found myself completely empty, so that's good, especially when you note how wonky the knife is. Imagine the World at War Zombies knife, but just worse. That's about the best way I can describe it. It has no range, doesn't do a lot of damage, and enemies can hit you even if you start a swinging motion half a second before they attacked. Lovely. So yeah, stick to guns and grenades. And speaking of that, I was actually surprised by the weapon variety in this title. You start off with a crappy pistol, but can use money called pataz, Pate, how do you pronounce that? But you can use money to buy new weapons and upgrades from the mysterious trader, and I'm not sure if I have a favorite firearm, but the Striker shotgun, the Killer 7 pistol, and the Mauser/Red 9 are some candidates, and the trader will also buy unwanted items from you, and you can purchase things like a larger inventory, maps, or medkits from him. But there was one thing I did not understand at all, and that is why you cannot buy ammo from him, especially when sometimes you can see he is clearly selling rounds. You just can't purchase them.
Dude, not cool.
And adding to the confusion, he just leaves ammo lying around his shops for you to take at times. So it's just, why can I not purchase the bullets you clearly have for sale, but you'll randomly give me free rounds? I don't know, whatever. But you find ammo and various items either when your foes drop them, finding them just lying around, or by smashing boxes and vases. But you gotta be careful, as snakes will hide in them at times and attack Leon, but kill said snakes and they drop an egg used for healing, because that makes sense. Another thing to note is that various traps lie around, like bear traps or tripwire bombs, which you can disarm by shooting them, although enemies can get caught on their own tripwire bombs, but they won't get caught when they walk over their own bear traps. Okay. I think that largely sums up normal solo play. On to boss fights. Again, I didn't beat the game, but as far as level 5-2, this game has some very interesting bosses, like the Mendez boss or the Salazar boss, who had an attack that could one-hit you. And I do not wish to replay that boss fight. Very nerve-wracking. And, just a guess, but I wonder if Mendez influenced the design of the Arkham Origins Bane. Okay, onto a big thorn in the side that Resident Evil 4 offers, and those are escort sections, where you have to tote around the fictional president's daughter Ashley, who is a cute idiot with the IQ of a 5-year-old. And being honest, my heart sank whenever I first picked her up, and I thought this would be Amy all over again. But thankfully, it's not near as bad as Amy, as you get breaks from having to escort her around, but she was still a pain to deal with. She's dumb as a rock and will walk right into aforementioned traps, so you'd have to baby-proof an area when you had Ashley in tow before you could proceed. She can't carry items for you, so rip. Let's see, what else? She's vulnerable to friendly fire, which I learned by accidentally hitting her. She doesn't know to run away from villagers trying to kidnap her. You can't give her a gun, and she cannot defend herself at all, which makes absolutely no sense at all. If I had a daughter, you'd better believe I'd teach her some self-defense and how to handle a firearm, especially if I was the president, because I'd know that my kid would be a high priority target. But it gets even more confusing, as there is a short section where you play as Ashley, and she can throw flaming lamps at enemies to burn them alive, proving that she has the knowledge and willpower to defend herself. If you can't tell, I wasn't a huge fan of her escort missions, and I was honestly glad when we got separated because that meant that I could proceed unburdened. Based off how dumb she is, I shouldn't be surprised that she got kidnapped if she just stands there like a moron while being attacked. I mean, shoot, the first time her and Leon get separated in the game is because of her own stupidity, and running away from Leon and being caught in a trap, and Mr. Kennedy has to go save her, and after breaking her out a second time, she gets kidnapped again. Ashley is like the Princess Peach of horror games, but at least Peach only gets kidnapped once per game based off my limited experience, and I guess that kind of brings us to the story. I didn't care too much for it, and it was kind of silly in its own way. In a nutshell, the president's daughter has been kidnapped and the US government sends 3 guys, Leon and his drivers, to extract her, which leads to Leon stumbling across a village infected with a parasite and some crazy religion. And along the way, a girl named Ada Wong gets tossed in and, I see you looking at them legs, Leon, don't tell me you ain't. Anyways, Leon and Ashley get infected with said parasite, manage to remove it, blow up some stuff, and escape. And for anybody who's wondering, I googled the last little bit of the story to see what happened for the few levels I didn't finish. The story was okay, I guess, but why did the US government only send in 3 guys for such a dangerous mission, and so poorly equipped? My bro Leon has a pistol and a knife at the start, and one thing that got me is, Leon straight up murdered the first villager he came across. He just barged into the dude's house, and then was surprised when the villager swung an axe at him, before taking said villager's life. While sure, he was infected, Leon didn't seem to know that yet. And from the other guy's perspective, there's some random dude in his house with a gun who doesn't speak his language. Wouldn't you consider taking a swing at him in this hypothetical situation? Plot armor, I guess. But probably my biggest criticism of the story is, why did the US government not just hire the traitor to save Ashley? My man just teleports around the game without getting harmed as far as we can tell, and he's clearly into money. Just pay him to rescue Ashley and he'd probably have gotten the job done in a fraction of the time. Okay, just kidding here, I wanted to make that joke. On a similar topic to the story, for whatever weird reason, the cutscenes didn't have subtitles even though I turned them on. Only the little sections where you talk on the radio had them, just something I wanted to note. On to a different topic. Horror elements. While this wasn't a super scary game, it had some creepy moments for sure, and having to keep your head on a swivel and the somewhat clunky controls added in some anxiety. And one thing that stood out to me was that some of the enemies would whisper some sort of chant that made my skin crawl a bit. Mix that in with the overall grunginess of the game and all the filth scattered everywhere, and I'd overall say that RE4 does a good job of being a not too scary horror game. Up to bat next is my discussion of enemy variety. RE4 had a pretty fair roster, with infected villagers, weird disciples, some juggernaut psychopath, some sort of a bat creature in one section. While not a huge variety by itself, there were a crap ton of variants, like enemies with armor, shields, flails, crossbows, dynamite, the list goes on. And some enemies could throw projectiles at you, which could be tough to dodge, but you could shoot them before they hit you to avoid damage. But one enemy type that I could not stand was one added late in the game, and that is the monsters that regenerate health. To combat these new monsters, you're given a thermal scope for the sniper, which lets you pinpoint little parasites in their body, which you must shoot to kill the creatures. Okay, a bit tedious using a sniper in tight hallways. I'll just use a different gun. I mean, I know where I'm supposed to shoot now that I've seen the parasite locations. Wrong. For whatever weird reason, you can only shoot the parasites with the sniper, which makes no sense. Why can't I use the shotgun or the pistol? Because you can't. That's why. Even though you know where you're supposed to shoot using other weapons, only the sniper can be used to defeat them. Just because, I guess, I wasn't amused by this. I think that does largely wrap up gameplay. There are some light puzzles here and there, nothing too tricky, so that's a plus. I'd say this game has good sound effects and overall a decent OST. Graphics, well, you already know I had to run everything at the bare minimum for whatever reason, even though I far exceed the needed specs to run everything at max, but I'd say the game looks good even with that. The controls were a bit clunky at first, but nothing too bad after some practice. I didn't like that enemies could spawn from nowhere on occasion. I remember at one point being in a cave or something, clearing out all the enemies in said cave, turning around to deal with advancing foes, and then getting attacked from behind by multiple infected who spawned from thin air. Or at least it seemed like they came from nowhere. Maybe they just somehow slipped past me or I missed them, but this only happened once or twice and wasn't a big deal overall. In conclusion, would I call this one of the best horror games ever? No. But that doesn't mean it's a bad game either. It just wasn't for me, with my biggest issue, outside of poor performance for this port, being the absurdly long game length. One dude on Game Fact in question said it took him a bloody 25 hours, so if this title had been a bit shorter, I'd probably like it more. Maybe I should have just ignored as many enemies as possible and just hightailed it through every area to save time, but that's not my definition of fun. In conclusion, I think I give RE4 an 8 out of 10 by my grade scale. Again, not a bad game. That earns it the title of great game by my scale. It's just not something I'd present with the title of best horror game ever. But as a final note, I'd probably have enjoyed it more if I played it at the time of release and not 2 decades later. A couple horror games I can suggest, however, if you liked RE4, would be Dead Space or Rip Out. And that is all from me for today, folks. I'm sure I probably ticked someone off, but I'm just being honest. And today's review came from a recent poll where I asked my viewers which of 4 horror games I should review next, and RE4 was the winner. Thanks to Zebras Games and Kuraz for nominating this game as a candidate, and I must say, I liked it more than RE5 any day. Well, thanks for watching, y'all. For any newcomers to my channel, I mostly play, review, and discuss zombie and horror games, so feel free to check out some of my other vids if that maybe sounds interesting. I hope everyone has a great day. Always remember that God loves you all very much. Peace.
Looks like this is it.
Ugh, it stinks.
Sure does.
No way, Leon.
Way.
Ah!